The autumn sun was setting over Pine Grove when Marcus Thompson, a 17-year-old honor student, walked home from basketball practice. His navy blue school backpack hung heavy with textbooks, and his worn basketball bounced rhythmically against the cracked sidewalk. The neighborhood, a mix of small businesses and modest homes, buzzed with the usual after-school activity. Marcus had just made team captain, and his mind wandered to the upcoming championship game. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother reminding him to pick up milk from Johnson's corner store. With a quick change in direction, he headed toward the small shop where he'd been a regular customer since elementary school. The store's bell chimed as Marcus entered, nodding hello to Mr. Johnson, the elderly owner who had known him since he was 5. He grabbed the milk and waited in line, scrolling through his phone to check the weather forecast for tomorrow's outdoor practice. That's when Officer James Davidson entered the store. Davidson was new to the precinct, having transferred from another city just 3 months ago. He hadn't bothered to attend any of the community meetings or get to know the local residents. His eyes immediately fixed on Marcus, watching his every move as the team paid for the milk. As Marcus left the store, he felt the officer's presence behind him. His heart rate quickened, not from guilt, but from the stories his parents had taught him about staying safe. He remembered his father's words: "Stay calm, be respectful, and remember your rights." "Hey you, stop right there," Officer Davidson's voice boomed across the street. Marcus stopped, keeping his hands visible just as his parents had taught him. The officer approached rapidly, his hand resting on his holster. "Sir?" Marcus asked calmly, though his heart pounded against his ribcage. "There's been a robbery reported. You match the description." Davidson barked, though no such report had been made. "Put your hands behind your head." Marcus complied, speaking clearly. "Officer, I'm Marcus Thompson. I just bought milk from Mr. Johnson's store. He knows me." "Shut up and get on the ground," Davidson demanded, drawing his weapon. Marcus slowly knelt, his mind racing but his movements deliberate. The milk carton rolled from his bag, spilling across the sidewalk. Nearby pedestrians stopped, phones raised, recording the incident. Mrs. Rodriguez, his Spanish teacher, emerged from the bakery across the street, immediately recognizing her star student. "Officer, that's Marcus Thompson. He's my student," she called out, hurrying closer while maintaining a safe distance. Mr. Johnson burst out of his store, his voice firm despite his age. "What are you doing? That boy's been my customer for 12 years. I just saw him buy milk." More neighbors gathered, their presence both protective and documenting. Marcus remained still, despite the rough treatment as Davidson cuffed him. His training as a peer mediator kicked in. Stay calm, document everything, remember details. Sergeant Williams, a veteran officer known for his community involvement, arrived on scene, having been called by a concerned citizen. He quickly assessed the situation, noting the gathering crowd, the spilled milk, and the clearly cooperative teenager. "Davidson, stand down," Williams commanded. "I know this young man. He's the captain of the basketball team and volunteers at the community center." The sergeant's arrival shifted the dynamic. He helped Marcus up, removed the handcuffs, and ensured he was unharmed. The crowd had grown, with many familiar faces showing support for Marcus while continuing to record. "Are you okay, son?" Sergeant Williams asked, his concern genuine. Marcus nodded, his composure intact despite the ordeal. "Yes, sir. I understand you're doing your job, but I'd like to file a formal complaint about this incident." Williams nodded approvingly at Marcus's professional demeanor. "You have every right to do so. We'll handle this properly, through the correct channels." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, holding out her phone. "I have the entire incident recorded, Marcus. We'll all be witnesses." The crowd murmured in agreement. Mr. Johnson brought out a fresh gallon of milk, refusing payment. "Your mother's waiting for this," he said kindly. "We'll make sure this is addressed the right way." As the situation de-escalated, Marcus stood tall, surrounded by his community. He thought about the younger kids who looked up to him at the community center, knowing his response to this incident would teach them more than any lecture could. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Marcus took out his phone and called his parents, ready to take the first steps toward meaningful change in his community, the legal way. Would you like me to continue with part 2? The next morning, the Thompson family's living room became a hub of focused activity. Marcus sat between his parents, Michael and Diana Thompson, as they reviewed the video footage collected from multiple witnesses. His father, a respected accountant, took meticulous notes while his mother, a high school counselor, made several important phone calls. "We're doing this the right way," Michael told his son, placing a supportive hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Change happens through proper channels and documentation." The dining room table was covered with printed forms, civilian complaint reports, witness statements, and contact information for the police department's Internal Affairs Division. News of the incident spread quickly through social media. By mid-morning, local community organizers and civil rights advocates had reached out to the family. Marcus's phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from teammates, teachers, and neighbors. Even the school principal called to offer his full backing. Sergeant Williams kept his word. He arrived at the Thompson home at 10 a.m. sharp, accompanied by Lieutenant Garcia from Internal Affairs. They sat across from the family, their expressions serious as they reviewed the incident. "Officer Davidson's body camera footage has been secured," Lieutenant Garcia explained, her tone professional. "Combined with civilian videos and witness statements, we have a clear picture of what transpired. This isn't the first complaint about Davidson's behavior." While the adults discussed procedures and protocols, Marcus noticed a group of young kids gathering outside their house. They were from the community center where he volunteered, holding handmade signs supporting him. Their presence reminded him why handling this situation properly mattered so much. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived during her lunch break, bringing more video footage and a detailed written statement. "The school board is behind you," she assured them. "We're implementing a new program to build better relationships between students and law enforcement. Marcus, we'd like you to help lead it." The afternoon brought a surprise visit from City Council member James Chen, who had seen the videos circulating online. "This can be a catalyst for positive change," he said, sitting with the family. "We've been working on a community oversight proposal. Your experience could help push it forward." Mr. Johnson closed his store early to join them, bringing with him decades of observation about neighborhood policing. "Things were different when officers walked their beats and knew every family," he recalled. "Maybe it's time to bring back some of those old ways, combined with new training." Marcus listened intently to every conversation. Between discussions, he worked on a thoughtful statement for the upcoming police commission meeting. His words focused not on anger or revenge, but on constructive solutions to prevent similar incidents from happening to others. Diana Thompson organized the growing stack of papers into a detailed timeline. "The system works when we work it properly," she explained to Marcus. "Every form filed, every statement recorded, every proper procedure followed. It all builds a case for change." As evening approached, Marcus's basketball team showed up in their jerseys, led by Coach Wilson. "Tomorrow's practice is dedicated to you, Captain," the coach announced. "But more importantly, we're here to learn how we can support real change in our community." The team gathered around the dining room table, learning about civilian oversight boards, proper police procedures, and the importance of knowing their rights while respecting the law. Marcus realized that this incident, though frightening, had created an unexpected classroom for civil engagement. "This isn't just about one incident," Marcus told his teammates. "It's about making sure our younger siblings and future kids can walk to the store without fear. But we have to do it right." The day ended with a community meeting in the Thompsons' backyard. Neighbors brought food, shared stories, and most importantly, discussed concrete steps for improvement. Plans were made for a youth police dialogue program, with Marcus suggested as one of the student coordinators. Before bed, Marcus checked his phone one last time. A text from Sergeant Williams appeared. "Internal Affairs review begins tomorrow. Officer Davidson suspended pending investigation. Proud of how you're handling this, son." His mother found him staring at the message. "Remember, Marcus, true change doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through persistent, lawful actions and community unity." Marcus nodded, thinking about the day's events. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more paperwork, and more steps toward real reform. But tonight, he felt stronger knowing his community stood united behind him, ready to transform a negative experience into positive change. The police commission meeting hall buzzed with energy as community members filled every seat. Marcus sat in the front row, wearing his basketball team captain's jacket, surrounded by his parents and a growing circle of supporters. The room, usually half empty during these meetings, now overflowed with concerned citizens. Police Chief Roberts opened the session, his face showing the strain of the past 48 hours. Behind him sat the entire command staff, including Sergeant Williams, who gave Marcus a subtle nod of encouragement. Officer Davidson was notably absent, still on administrative leave. Before we begin, Chief Roberts announced, "I want to acknowledge the seriousness of recent events. Our department's primary mission is to protect and serve ALO members of this community." His emphasis on all drew murmurs from the crowd. Marcus approached the podium when his name was called. His prepared statement lay before him, but he spoke from the heart, his voice clear and steady. "I stand here not seeking revenge or division, but asking for meaningful change. What happened to me isn't just about one officer or one incident. It's about building trust between law enforcement and the community they serve." The room fell silent as Marcus shared his story. He described not just the incident, but his years of positive involvement in the community, his volunteer work, his academic achievements, his role as team captain. Several officers in the room shifted uncomfortably as they realized this suspect was someone who had probably refereed their children's youth basketball games. Mr. Johnson spoke next, his decades of watching the neighborhood's changes adding weight to his words. "I've seen good police work and bad police work," he said. "What happened to Marcus was bad police work, but how we respond to it will determine what kind of community we become." Mrs. Rodriguez presented the video evidence, now carefully analyzed by police training experts. "This isn't just about one student's experience," she explained. "It's about every student's right to feel safe in their own neighborhood." The breakthrough moment came when Officer Lisa Chen, a rookie cop who had remained quiet until now, stood up. "As a new officer, I was trained to see potential threats," she admitted. "But we need better training to see potential allies. Marcus Thompson isn't a threat. He's exactly the kind of young leader we should be partnering with." Chief Roberts listened intently as speaker after speaker offered constructive suggestions. Community advisory boards, improved training programs, regular neighborhood meetings, and youth police partnerships. Marcus's case had become a catalyst for broader reform. Sergeant Williams presented a detailed proposal, developed with input from Marcus and other community members. It included mandatory cultural sensitivity training, regular community engagement requirements, and a new mentorship program pairing officers with local youth. "This isn't about pointing fingers," Sergeant Williams explained. "It's about building bridges. Marcus has shown us how to turn a negative encounter into an opportunity for growth." The commission voted unanimously to adopt the new measures. But the most surprising moment came when Chief Roberts asked Marcus to co-chair the newly formed Youth Police Advisory Council. "We need your perspective," the chief said. "Help us do better." As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by both citizens and officers, all eager to be part of the solution. Officer Chen asked if she could volunteer at the community center. Several veteran officers requested to join the mentorship program. Outside the hall, a group of younger kids waited for Marcus. They were from the neighborhood, looking up to him more than ever. "Are you going to help train the police?" one asked excitedly. Marcus smiled, remembering how scared he'd been just days ago. "We're all going to help each other," he replied. "That's how communities grow stronger." Later that evening, as the Thompson family drove home, they passed Officer Davidson's empty patrol car spot at the precinct. Marcus's father squeezed his son's shoulder. "You've handled this with more maturity than most adults would," he said proudly. "Because you and Mom taught me that real change doesn't come from revenge," Marcus replied. "It comes from working together to fix what's broken." As they pulled into their driveway, Marcus noticed new basketball hoops being installed at the community center across the street. A sign announced, "Future home of the Youth Police Basketball League." Sergeant Williams stood supervising the installation, waving as they passed. The incident that could have torn the community apart was instead pulling it together, one small change at a time. Marcus grabbed his basketball from the trunk, heading toward the new courts. Several officers and neighborhood kids were already gathering, ready to play the first unofficial game. 2 weeks after the police commission meeting, Pine Grove was witnessing remarkable changes. The Youth Police Basketball League had grown from a simple idea into a weekly event that packed the community center's courts. Marcus found himself at the center of this transformation, though not in the way anyone had expected. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, Marcus stood at center court, but not as a player. Instead, he wore a referee's striped shirt, whistle hanging around his neck. To his left, Officer Lisa Chen coached a team of middle school students. To his right, Sergeant Williams led another group of excited kids through warm-up drills. Remember, Marcus called out to both teams, "This isn't just about basketball. It's about building trust." The players nodded, their faces serious despite their youth. Each team was deliberately mixed, half local kids, half junior police cadets from the department's youth program. In the bleachers, parents and officers sat together, talking casually about neighborhood issues. Mr. Johnson had set up a refreshment stand where Officer Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's husband, who'd recently transferred to community policing, was buying water bottles for some of the younger spectators. The internal affairs investigation into Officer Davidson had concluded yesterday. While the details weren't public, the changes in department policy were clear and immediate. Every officer was now required to complete 40 hours of community engagement per month, not just as law enforcement, but as neighbors and mentors. During a water break, Marcus overheard two of his former critics, Officer Parker and Coach Wilson, discussing plans for a joint police school athletic program. "Kids need to see us as people first, badges second," Parker was saying, watching as his daughter played alongside Marcus's cousin in the next game. Diana Thompson arrived with fresh news from the school board meeting. The district had approved funding for a new curriculum that would bring officers into classrooms, not for security, but for mentoring and career guidance. Marcus's story had become part of the training material. "Chief Roberts wants you to help present at next month's police academy session," she told Marcus as he toweled off between games. They're revamping their entire approach to community interaction. The biggest surprise came when City Council member Chen arrived with an unexpected visitor, Officer Davidson. The suspended officer had requested to address the community, not through lawyers or union representatives, but face to face. Davidson approached Marcus during a break between games, his usual stern expression replaced with genuine remorse. "I let fear and prejudice cloud my judgment," he admitted, extending his hand. "I've spent these weeks really thinking about the damage those biases can cause. I'd like to learn from my mistakes, if you're willing to teach me." Marcus studied the officer's face, seeing not the man who had forced him to the ground, but someone trying to change. He shook Davidson's hand. "Next week's session is on de-escalation techniques. You're welcome to join us." The afternoon continued with more games, but the real victories weren't shown on any scoreboard. Officer Chen's team celebrated when shy Tommy Martinez, who'd never spoken to police before, high-fived his officer teammate after scoring. Sergeant Williams beamed as his players huddled up, naturally mixing without caring about uniforms or backgrounds. Later, as Marcus helped put away equipment, Chief Roberts stopped by with news. The department was creating a new position, Community Youth Coordinator, and wanted Marcus to help design the role for when he finished college. "You've shown us what real leadership looks like," the chief explained. Outside, the sunset painted the basketball courts in warm colors as families lingered, chatting and planning future events. Mr. Johnson, closing his refreshment stand, smiled at the scene. "This is what community looks like," he told Marcus. "Not us versus them, just us." Marcus watched as Officer Davidson joined a group of kids practicing free throws, offering gentle pointers and words of encouragement. The officer caught his eye and nodded, acknowledging how far they'd both come from that tense moment on the sidewalk. Diana found her son lost in thought. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the best revenge is showing others a better way forward." Marcus nodded, understanding that true change wasn't about getting even, it was about getting better, together. As the last families headed home, Marcus picked up his basketball, dribbling slowly across the empty court. The echo of the ball against pavement now carried a different meaning, not of fear or division, but of hope and unity, one bounce at a time. 1 month into Pine Grove's transformation, Marcus found himself standing before a packed auditorium at the State Police Academy. Rows of fresh-faced cadets sat attentively as he shared his story, but this time with a surprising partner, Officer Davidson stood beside him, adding his own perspective on how bias could cloud judgment. "It's not about being perfect," Marcus explained to the cadets. "It's about being willing to learn and grow." He glanced at Davidson, who nodded in agreement. The officer who had once threatened him was now working alongside him to prevent similar incidents. The presentation included body camera footage from the incident, but it didn't end there. It also showed clips from recent community basketball games, youth mentoring sessions, and joint training exercises. The contrast was striking: fear and mistrust replaced by partnership and understanding. During the break, a young cadet approached Marcus. "I grew up in a neighborhood where we never trusted cops," she admitted. "That's why I joined the academy, to be the change I wanted to see. Your story gives me hope that it's possible." Back in Pine Grove, the community center had become a model for other districts. Today, representatives from 3 neighboring cities were visiting to observe their programs in action. Sergeant Williams led the tour, proudly showing off the new meditation room where officers and teens practice conflict resolution techniques. Mrs. Rodriguez's Spanish class had evolved into a cultural exchange program. Officers attended weekly sessions, learning not just language but customs and traditions from the diverse community they served. Officer Chen had become so proficient she was now helping translate during community meetings. The afternoon's big event was the inaugural Trust Walk. Pairs of officers and teenagers leading blindfolded partners through an obstacle course. Marcus watched as Officer Davidson, now back on modified duty, carefully guided Tommy Martinez around cones and barriers, their previous fears of each other long forgotten. "Your case study is being included in the National Police Training Curriculum," Chief Roberts informed Marcus during the event. "Departments across the country want to learn from our experience." The chief paused, watching as another pair completed the course. "But more importantly, our own community is healing." The evidence was everywhere. Emergency calls now included requests for specific officers who had built relationships with local families. Crime rates had dropped as trust increased. The anonymous tip line, once silent, now regularly received information from citizens who trusted the police to handle it properly. Mr. Johnson's store had become an unofficial community hub. Officers stopped by not just for coffee but to chat with customers, help elderly shoppers with their bags, and catch up on neighborhood news. The security camera that had captured Marcus's confrontation now recorded daily scenes of cooperation and friendship. During the afternoon basketball session, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Officer Davidson, working with a group of younger kids, stopped a practice drill to demonstrate proper defensive stance. The same stance he had once forced Marcus to take was now being taught as part of a game, transformed from a symbol of fear into a lesson in sportsmanship. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes," Diana Thompson remarked, watching the scene. She had just finished a meeting about expanding the program to other districts. "Your father and I are proud of how you've helped guide this transformation." The day's activities concluded with a new tradition, the community circle. Officers, teens, and residents sat together, sharing concerns and celebrations. Officer Chen announced her promotion to Community Liaison Officer. Tommy Martinez proudly reported his improved grades, crediting the homework help he received at the center. As the circle closed, Marcus shared his latest news. The state governor had invited him to join a task force on police-community relations. "But my heart will always be here in Pine Grove," he assured everyone. "This is where real change begins." Walking home that evening, Marcus passed the spot where he had once been forced to the ground. The memory no longer brought fear or anger. Instead, he saw it as the catalyst that had sparked a movement toward understanding and growth. A patrol car slowed beside him, Officer Davidson heading home after his shift. They exchanged waves, both knowing that their shared experience had helped create something meaningful. The officer drove on, and Marcus continued walking, his basketball tucked under his arm, his community forever changed by the power of choosing progress over revenge. 6 months after the incident, Pine Grove hosted the state's first Youth Police Leadership Conference. The high school gymnasium was transformed into an exhibition space, with booths showcasing various community initiatives. Marcus, now a senior preparing for college, stood at the center of it all, wearing a badge that read Conference Co-Chair. Governor Harris had just finished touring the facility, clearly impressed by what she saw. Pine Grove has become a model for the entire state, she announced to the gathered crowd. What started as a confrontation has evolved into a blueprint for community policing. Marcus led a workshop titled From Conflict to Connection, sharing the stage with Officer Davidson. The presentation included role-playing scenarios where teens and officers switched places, experiencing situations from each other's perspectives. The audience watched intently as Davidson demonstrated how his approach to community interaction had completely changed. I used to see threats everywhere, Davidson explained, his voice carrying across the silent room. Now I see opportunities for understanding. He glanced at Marcus, adding, "Sometimes our greatest teachers come from our biggest mistakes." During the lunch break, Marcus spotted Tommy Martinez giving tours to visiting police chiefs. The once shy boy now confidently explained how their peer mediation program had resolved 15 potential conflicts in the past month alone. Officer Chen stood nearby, beaming with pride at her young protege. The conference's most powerful moment came during the story circle, where community members and officers shared their experiences of transformation. Mr. Johnson spoke about how his store's daily police visits had changed from tense surveillance to friendly check-ins. Mrs. Rodriguez described how her students now saw officers as mentors rather than threats. A surprise visitor arrived in the afternoon, Marcus's basketball rival from the neighboring town's team. "We want to start something similar in our community," he explained. "Our police department needs what you built here." Marcus immediately began connecting him with Sergeant Williams to share their program framework. The technology booth showcased their new community app, developed by local teens working with police specialists. It allowed residents to connect directly with their neighborhood officers, share concerns, and coordinate community events. Officer Parker demonstrated how it had helped organize midnight basketball games that had virtually eliminated youth incidents in troubled areas. Diana Thompson hosted a session for parents, explaining how to turn difficult conversations about police interactions into teaching moments. "Our children learn from how we respond to challenges," she said. Marcus showed us that choosing constructive engagement over anger creates lasting change. During the afternoon sports demonstration, Marcus refereed a game between mixed teams of officers and teens from various districts. The players moved with natural cooperation, their earlier barriers forgotten in the flow of the game. Even Chief Roberts joined in, his tie discarded as he played alongside the youth he served. The most touching moment came when a group of elementary school students performed a play they had written. It told the story of Pine Grove's transformation, but with a twist. In their version, Officer Davidson was a superhero who learned that his real power came from helping others. Davidson watched from the audience, wiping away tears as the children acted out his journey from fear to friendship. As the conference drew to a close, Marcus found himself standing with Officer Davidson near the spot where their original confrontation had been photographed. This time, a news photographer captured them sharing a laugh, the image a powerful symbol of how far they'd come. "We're sending officers from across the state to train with your program," Governor Harris told Marcus before leaving. "But more importantly, you've shown us that real change doesn't require violence or revenge. It requires vision and dedication." The evening ended with a community dinner in the school cafeteria. Officers and residents sat mixed together, sharing stories and plans for future initiatives. Tommy Martinez announced his intention to study criminal justice in college, wanting to become an officer who would build on Pine Grove's new tradition. As Marcus helped clean up after the conference, he found his old basketball in the equipment room. Bouncing it thoughtfully, he remembered the scared teenager he'd been 6 months ago. That fear had transformed into purpose, that moment of potential tragedy into a movement for change. Outside, the evening patrol cars drove past the school, their lights casting gentle shadows. But in Pine Grove, those lights no longer sparked fear. They were simply reminders that the community's guardians were on watch, partners in keeping the peace they'd all worked so hard to build. As graduation day approached at Pine Grove High School, Marcus sat in his bedroom reviewing college acceptance letters. Among them was a special envelope, a full scholarship to State University's Criminal Justice Program, jointly funded by the Police Officers Association and community donors. Its journey had opened doors no one could have predicted. The morning began with a surprise visit from Officer Davidson, now promoted to Community Relations Sergeant. He carried a carefully wrapped package. "A whole department signed this," he said, handing it to Marcus. Inside was a basketball covered with messages of gratitude and encouragement from every officer on the force. Downstairs, Diana Thompson was organizing photos for the graduation party. Images of the past year told an incredible story. Marcus testifying at the state capitol, leading youth police workshops, and countless moments of community transformation. The most recent photo showed him receiving the Governor's Youth Leadership Award. Channel 5 wants to do a special report. Michael Thompson told his son during breakfast. They're calling Pine Grove the Miracle District, where police and community became family. Marcus smiled, remembering how that miracle had grown from the darkest moment of his life. At school, the hallways buzzed with excitement. The graduating class had voted to dedicate their yearbook to the Youth Police Partnership Program. Pages of photos showed students and officers working together, tutoring sessions, basketball games, community service projects, and candid moments of friendship that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped Marcus in the hallway. "Remember when you were afraid to walk home?" she asked softly. "Now our students are applying to the police academy, wanting to continue what you started." 3 seniors had already been accepted to the cadet program, including Tommy Martinez. During lunch, Chief Roberts made a surprise announcement over the school intercom. The department was establishing the Marcus Thompson Youth Leadership Scholarship, an annual award for students who demonstrated commitment to building police-community relationships. Marcus listened, surrounded by classmates who now saw law enforcement through entirely different eyes. Officer Chen arrived with more news. The Pine Grove model was being adopted by police departments in 3 neighboring states. "They're requesting you as a consultant during summer break," she told Marcus. "Your story is changing policies across the country." Mr. Johnson closed his store early to help set up for the graduation ceremony. His security cameras, which had once captured a moment of injustice, now held thousands of hours of positive interactions between officers and community members. "Sometimes," he told Marcus, "the best stories start with the hardest chapters." At the graduation rehearsal, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Officer Davidson was helping direct traffic, but instead of tension, there was easy conversation between him and the students. Children waved from car windows, parents stopped to chat, and the officer who had once inspired fear now embodied the change they'd all worked to create. Sergeant Williams arrived with a folder of statistics for Marcus's upcoming college research project. Crime rates had dropped 40%, community tip reporting had increased by 300%, and officer commendations from residents had reached an all-time high. But the most telling number was 0, the count of serious incidents between officers and youth in the past year. As the sun set on graduation eve, the community center hosted a special dinner. Officers and residents shared tables, swapped stories, and celebrated their shared success. Tommy Martinez performed a spoken-word piece about transformation, moving many to tears when he described how his fear of police had turned to aspiration to become one. The evening's highlight came when Officer Davidson stood to speak. "A year ago, I represented everything wrong with policing," he admitted. "Marcus could have sought revenge. Instead, he showed us a better path. He didn't just change me, he changed all of us." Marcus looked around the room, seeing not uniforms and civilians, but one united community. His mother squeezed his hand, whispering, "Your revenge was making them family." Later that night, as Marcus hung his graduation robe, he found a note in the pocket. It was from a freshman he'd mentored. "Because of you, I'm not afraid anymore. Neither are they." Attached was a photo of the student playing basketball with Officer Davidson. Tomorrow he would graduate, but Marcus knew this wasn't an ending. Pine Grove had become a beacon of hope, proving that the strongest response to injustice isn't revenge, it's transformation. As he heard patrol cars passing outside, Marcus smiled. Graduation day dawned bright at Pine Grove High School. As Marcus adjusted his cap and gown in front of the mirror, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him and his community to this moment. The tassel on his cap bore 2 colors, his school's traditional blue and the police department's silver, symbolizing the bridge that had been built. The ceremony itself was unlike any the town had seen before. Officers in dress uniforms sat alongside parents and families. Chief Roberts had been invited as a keynote speaker, while Officer Davidson, now Sergeant Davidson, had the honor of presenting several diplomas. The atmosphere wasn't just celebratory, it was a testament to healing. A year ago, Chief Roberts began his speech. A single incident could have torn our community apart. Instead, thanks to the wisdom of a young man who chose understanding over anger, it brought us together. The crowd's applause was punctuated by the cheers of younger students who had benefited from the programs Marcus helped create. When Marcus took the stage as class speaker, he carried with him the basketball that had been rolling across the sidewalk that fateful day. This ball could have been a symbol of fear, he said, holding it up. Instead, it became a tool for change. Sometimes life's hardest moments are just the beginning of our greatest victories. Tommy Martinez sat in the front row, already wearing his police cadet program shirt under his gown. Behind him, Officer Chen wiped away tears as Marcus described how their community had transformed fear into friendship. Mr. Johnson, recording everything on his phone, nodded proudly from his seat. The surprise came during the diploma presentation. As Marcus crossed the stage, every officer in attendance stood and saluted. It wasn't just a gesture for him. It was a promise to the community that the changes they'd made would last. Chief Roberts pinned a special commendation to Marcus's gown, champion of community change. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the community center where the basketball courts had been transformed into a reception area. Photos from the past year lined the walls, images of progress, partnership, and pride. A special display showed how the Pine Grove model was being adopted by cities across the country. Sergeant Davidson approached Marcus with an unexpected gift, his own badge, framed alongside a photo of them teaching together at the police academy. "You taught me that a badge isn't about power," he said quietly. "It's about service and connection." The party paused for a special announcement. Governor Harris, speaking via video call, declared that the state would establish a Police-Youth Partnership Institute with Pine Grove as its headquarters. Marcus had been offered a position on its advisory board while he attended college. As evening approached, an impromptu basketball game started, graduates and officers playing together one last time before the seniors departed for college. Marcus watched as Tommy Martinez scored a basket, assisted by Officer Chen, while proud parents and police families cheered together from the sidelines. Mrs. Rodriguez shared exciting news. The school district had approved a new curriculum she and Marcus had developed, teaching students and officers about communication, understanding, and mutual respect. "Your legacy will keep growing," she told him with pride. Near sunset, Marcus found a quiet moment with his parents. "When you were forced to the ground that day," his father said, "we could have let anger guide us. Instead, you showed everyone a better way." Diana Thompson added, "Your revenge wasn't getting even. It was getting better, all of us together." The evening ended with a candlelight ceremony. One by one, graduates and officers lit each other's candles, symbolizing how light can spread from person to person, changing darkness into dawn. When it was Marcus's turn, Sergeant Davidson stepped forward to share his flame, the shadows merging into one on the gymnasium wall. As the celebration wound down, Marcus took one last shot on the court where so much had changed. The ball swooshed through the net just as patrol cars outside flashed their lights in celebration, not as a warning, but as a farewell salute to a graduate who had helped transform their town. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin packing for college, but his real life's work had already begun. Pine Grove had become more than a success story. It was a blueprint for how communities could heal, grow, and thrive together. His revenge hadn't been about getting back. It had been about moving forward, one connection at a time. The end.